Hey everyone, welcome back. So it looks like you're really interested in learning more about AI and especially about the potential risks and how we might avoid some of those pitfalls. Well, that's what we're diving deep into today.
Yeah, and it's interesting, this whole conversation about AI regulation, it's really becoming global. It's
Hmm.
not just tech experts anymore. I mean, lawmakers around the world are getting involved, trying to figure out, how this technology might impact society.
Yeah, for sure. It's a complex topic and one that we really can't afford to ignore, especially when you look at some of the specific concerns that people are raising. Like, let's start with predictive policing. So we're talking about AI systems that are designed to try to predict crime before it happens.
Right. And, the big question is what happens when these systems get it wrong? Johnny Harris, in his video about AI risks, he points to this case in Detroit where the police used an AI algorithm to try and identify a suspect from security footage. And the algorithm got it wrong and an innocent man was arrested.
Wow.
It just shows how high the stakes are.
Yeah, that really does make you think about the implications, right? It's almost like something out of, Minority Report, but it's actually happening.
Yeah, it raises some serious concerns about how we ensure, fairness and accuracy in these systems. One of the key challenges is bias. Remember, these algorithms, they're trained on data, right? And if that data reflects existing societal biases, well, the AI is going to learn and perpetuate those biases.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the data it's fed and how that data might reflect, problems that already exist in society.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I think this EU AI bill is so interesting. They're actually considering prohibiting the use of AI for predictive policing altogether.
Wow.
Their argument is, people should be judged on their actions, not on predictions that might be flawed or biased.
Now that's a bold stance.
Yeah.
It really highlights how seriously some lawmakers are taking these potential risks. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about another area where AI could have a major impact, and that's elections. Specifically deepfakes and the potential for misinformation to spread.
Yeah, deepfakes have the potential to, really disrupt democratic processes. As Harris explains in his video, these are synthetic media. So basically videos that can make it look like anyone is saying or doing anything, even things they never actually said or did.
Right.
And they're getting increasingly sophisticated. So it's becoming harder to distinguish them from real footage.
I think we've all seen examples of how easy it is to manipulate images and videos. But to think that someone could create a deep fake of a political candidate saying something, inflammatory right before an election, that's a whole other level of concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The implications are huge. Think about the potential impact on voters' trust in candidates and the electoral process itself. I mean, this technology could easily be used to spread misinformation, so discord, and potentially even influence election outcomes. It's a real threat to the very foundations of democracy.
So what's being done to address this? Are there any measures in place to prevent deepfakes from being used to disrupt elections?
Well, there are efforts underway in both the U.S. and the EU to regulate the use of deepfakes, particularly in the context of elections. California, for example, is considering legislation that would require platforms to label synthetic media and prohibit its use in election-related content.
Okay, that sounds like a good first step. But I'm curious, how effective can labels really be? I mean, what's to stop someone from simply ignoring a label or, resharing a deepfake without the label?
That's a valid point, and that's where the concept of invisible watermarks comes in. The EU AI bill actually proposes requiring that deepfakes be coded with these invisible watermarks that special software can detect. So even if a deepfake video is shared without a label, the software could still flag it as synthetic media.
That's a clever approach. It's like an extra layer of protection against the spread of misinformation.
Yeah.
But I can't help but wonder, isn't this a bit of an arms race? As soon as we develop a way to detect deepfakes, someone will probably figure out a way to create even more convincing ones, right?
Yeah, you've hit on a key challenge. Technology often advances faster than our ability to regulate it.
Right.
But that's precisely why it's so important to have these conversations now, to establish ethical guidelines and legal frameworks before deepfake technology becomes even more powerful and potentially uncontrollable.
Okay, let's shift gears one more time and talk about another potential application of AI that's been generating a lot of buzz and concern. I'm talking about social scoring systems. So the idea of using AI to assess and rank individuals based on their behavior and characteristics, it's a topic that often sparks comparisons to these dystopian sci-fi scenarios.
Yeah, it's understandable why people make those comparisons. I mean, think about the concept of a credit score. It's a number based on your financial behavior that can impact your access to loans, housing, even jobs. Now, Imagine expanding that concept to encompass almost every aspect of your life using AI to track and evaluate your actions online and offline.
Wow, that's a pretty intense thought.
Yeah.
It does feel a bit like something out of, a Black Mirror episode.
Right.
But is this really something we should be concerned about, or is it more of a science fiction fantasy?
Well, it's not entirely hypothetical. I mean, as Harris points out, China is already experimenting with a social credit system that uses AI to track citizens' behavior and assign them a score. And this score can then impact their lives in various ways, influencing their access to services, travel options, even social standing. It's a real-world example of how AI can be used to create a system of rewards and punishments based on individuals' perceived trustworthiness and compliance.
So it's like taking the idea of a credit score and applying it to every aspect of someone's life. But isn't that just a more advanced version of the systems we already have in place, like credit scores and background checks?
Well, while there are some similarities, the key difference is the level of invasiveness and the sheer amount of data involved. I mean, the Chinese system goes far beyond financial data. It incorporates social media activity, online purchases, even minor infractions like jaywalking.
Oh, wow.
It paints a comprehensive picture of an individual's behavior, which can then be used to judge and categorize them.
So it's not just about financial responsibility anymore. It's about monitoring and evaluating every aspect of someone's life, even their online behavior. That does raise some serious concerns about privacy and personal freedom.
Exactly. And while the U.S. doesn't currently have a system like this in place, there's a concern that AI could make it much easier to implement such a system in the future.
So the technology is there, and that's what makes this conversation so important, right? We need to think critically about how this technology could be used and what safeguards need to be put in place. What are some of the steps being taken to prevent these kinds of systems from being implemented in places like the U.S.?
Well, for one, the EU's AI bill specifically bans AI social scoring as an unacceptable risk.
Okay.
This is a strong statement that recognizes the potential for such systems to be misused and lead to discrimination and social control.
It is encouraging to see that some lawmakers are taking a proactive approach now for our final topic in this segment. Let's delve into an area that always seems to capture the imagination and anxieties when we talk about AI. It's the idea of AI being used in the context of nuclear weapons. I can't help but think of classic sci-fi films like The Terminator, where machines make life or death decisions.
It's a common theme in science fiction, and it does tap into some deep-seated fears about technology and the potential for it to spiral out of control. But as Harris points out in his video, there's a real-world concern about giving AI too much autonomy when it comes to nuclear weapons. I mean, while an AI might be capable of processing vast amounts of data and making complex calculations faster than a human, the consequences of even a minor miscalculation or misinterpretation of data could be catastrophic.
That's what's so unsettling about it, right? We're talking about a situation where a single error by an AI system could potentially lead to global devastation. It's a scenario that's hard to even contemplate, but what if an AI system with its ability to process information and make decisions at lightning speed could actually reduce the risk of human error in such high-stakes situations?
That's an interesting perspective. Proponents of AI in this context might argue that removing human emotion and potential for bias could actually make these systems safer. However, the critical question remains, what happens if the AI misinterprets the data? What if it triggers a nuclear launch based on a false alarm or a miscalculation? That's the nightmare scenario that keeps many experts and policymakers up at night.
It's a terrifying thought, and while it might seem far-fetched, it's a possibility that lawmakers are taking seriously. What kind of safeguards are being put in place to prevent such a scenario from happening?
Well, there are ongoing efforts to establish international agreements and regulations to prevent the development and deployment of fully autonomous weapons systems. For example, there's a proposed bill in the U.S. Senate called the Block Nuclear Launch by Autonomous AI Act.
Okay.
As the name suggests, it aims to prevent machines from having sole authority over nuclear weapons, ensuring that a human remains in the loop to make those critical decisions.
That sounds like a crucial step in the right direction. The idea is to leverage the strengths of AI, its speed, accuracy, and ability to process vast amounts of data while still maintaining human oversight and control over these incredibly powerful weapons.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It's up to us as a society to determine how this technology is developed and deployed and to establish clear, ethical, and legal boundaries to ensure that it's used responsibly. Yeah, it really is like we're at a crossroads with this whole AI thing. On the one hand, we've got this incredible potential, and on the other, we've got these, profound risks that we need to think carefully about.
It's a balancing act, for sure, figuring out how to use this technology for good without, letting it get out of control.
Yeah.
But before we get too caught up in all the, the anxieties surrounding AI, it's important to remember that it's not all doom and gloom, right? I mean, there's a lot of excitement, too, about how AI can be used to improve our lives and, solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to get swept up in all the, dystopian possibilities, but AI also has this incredible potential for good. Like, think about healthcare, environmental protection, disaster preparedness. I mean, AI-powered systems could help doctors diagnose diseases earlier, and more accurately, algorithms could predict and maybe even help us mitigate the effects of climate change.
That's the kind of future I want to be a part of. AI helping us solve problems, not creating new ones.
Right. It's all about perspective, focusing on the positive applications and remembering that we're still in the early stages of AI development, so we have this opportunity to shape its trajectory and make sure it's used for good.
And that's where people like Carme Artigas come in.
Yeah.
Right. The AI expert featured in Harris's video. She's not just advocating for responsible AI development, but she's actually working on legislation and regulations to try and guide it in a positive direction.
Yeah, she's a powerful voice in this whole global conversation about AI ethics and governance, working to make sure we harness the power of this technology while also protecting ourselves from its potential dangers.
Her work is a good reminder that we don't just have to, passively accept whatever technological advancements come our way. We can demand transparency, accountability, ethical development from the companies and governments that are, shaping the future of AI.
Absolutely. We all have a role to play in this.
So while we're, grappling with all these ethical implications of AI and working to put safeguards in place, it's also important to remember the importance of human connection, and supporting initiatives that are making a real difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings to mind this podcast called Standing in the Gaps. They're doing some really remarkable work highlighting these stories of resilience and the power of people coming together to support each other.
It's a nice reminder that in the midst of all this, technological advancement and anxiety about the future, human connection is still crucial. People helping people, building bridges, creating community, especially in times of need. And what's really inspiring is that Standing in the Gaps is actually running a GoFundMe campaign right now.
Oh, that's great. That's a perfect example of how technology can be used for good. They're using a platform like GoFundMe to expand their reach, amplify the voices of people who are often overlooked, and inspire action and positive change.
Exactly. And they're hoping to use these funds to share even more stories of hope and resilience.
Yeah.
Stories that demonstrate the power of human connection and inspire others to get involved in their own communities.
It's a reminder that even when things seem really challenging, there's always hope, and there are always people working to make the world a better place. Sometimes it's easy to feel overwhelmed by, the scale of the problems we face, but Standing in the Gaps shows us that even small acts of kindness and support can make a difference.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together. And we have the power to lift each other up and create positive change in our own communities.
Absolutely. And by supporting initiatives like this, we're not only helping them amplify their message, but we're also saying, we believe in the power of human connection and community building.
So while we're, thinking about the ethical implications of AI and trying to establish safeguards against potential risks, let's also remember the importance of human connection and support initiatives like Standing in the Gaps that are making a tangible difference in the world.
It's all about finding that balance, exploring the frontiers of technology, but also nurturing the human spirit, recognizing that our shared future depends on both.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the potential risks of AI to the inspiring work being done by Standing in the Gaps. And the key takeaway, I think, is that we have a choice in how we shape the future. We can focus on the anxieties and the dystopian possibilities, or we can choose to embrace the potential for good and support initiatives that are making a positive impact.
It's about being informed, engaged, and empowered to make a difference both individually and collectively.
And it's really cool how they're using technology, to connect with people and share these uplifting stories. Standing in the Gaps is really leveraging the internet and social media to create a sense of community that goes way beyond, just geography.
Yeah, it's a great example of using the tools we have to spread positivity and, actually make a difference in the world. It's not just about, passively watching or reading stuff. It's about getting involved and contributing to something bigger.
Exactly. And their GoFundMe campaign is a perfect example of that. They're inviting people to be a part of their mission to help them, spread their message and reach even more people with these stories of hope and resilience.
And what's really inspiring is that they're not just talking about these issues, they're actually taking action. They're going out into communities, listening to people's stories and providing support where it's needed.
It's like a reminder that we don't have to wait for someone else to fix everything. We can all do something, even if it seems small, to make a difference. Whether it's, supporting a cause, volunteering our time, or just helping someone out, every little bit counts.
It really is all about recognizing how connected everything is, We're all part of this big web of life, and what we do, even the small things, can have a ripple effect.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the potential risks of AI to the really inspiring work being done by standing in the gaps. And I think the main takeaway is that the future isn't set in stone. It's something we're creating through the choices we make, the things we do, and the stories we tell. We can focus on the problems, or we can look for opportunities and work towards building a better future for everyone.
It's all about finding that balance. Being aware of the risks, but also staying optimistic and looking for the good.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Wow.
And on that note, we want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. If you're feeling inspired by the work that Standing in the Gaps is doing and want to support their mission of, sharing stories of resilience and community building, be sure to check out their GoFundMe campaign. We'll put a link in the show notes.
And remember, no matter what challenges you're facing, you're not alone. There are people out there who care, people who are working to make things better, and people who are ready to stand with you in the gaps.
Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep believing in the power of human connection to make the world a better place.